Oh, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Unless you live under a stone, you've heard about the recent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Luckily for the world, the attempt on one of America's most influential figures of this time failed, because I for one think the consequences would be disastrous. And that made me curious. What actually happens when a political figure is assassinated? Well, I quickly found out that history has no shortage of examples. So why not start at one of the oldest? The Roman general Julius Caesar. For the people that do not know who Julius Caesar is, first I want to say shame on you. Really, you should have paid more attention in history class. Julius Caesar was a very successful Roman general and statesman. His conquest expanded Rome's territory enormously. Eventually, the general seized power and appointed himself as dictator for life. Not a very subtle title if you ask me. And this title was unsurprisingly also one of the reasons he was assassinated by around 60 members of the Roman Senate. The Senate saw Julius Caesar's dictatorship for life going the wrong direction and wanted to keep Rome away from going back to being a monarchy. So they decided to stab Julius Caesar 23 times. Now there was one big problem with their plan. The people of Rome loved Caesar. The common Roman was outraged by Caesar's murder, leading to riots and violence all over Rome. Caesar's funeral further increased the public sentiment against the assassins, and even a wax statue of Caesar displaying all of his stab wounds was paraded through Rome, making the public sentiment even worse. And again, riots broke out and the angry mob attacked the homes of the senators involved in the assassination, forcing the senators to flee Rome. The former allies of Caesar seized power and started bringing the conspirators to justice. The conspirators, being rich little shits, didn't take too kindly to this, and a civil war ensued. Thousands of people died. And eventually the war ended, with Caesar's former allies coming out victorious. However, later they would have a falling out of their own and start their own civil war. So in a way, Julius Caesar's death caused two civil wars. A more recent example is Abraham Lincoln. Now this man shouldn't need an introduction, but because some of you are the reason there's a warning label on Tide Pods, I'm going to give one anyway. In the time of Abraham Lincoln, the tension between the northern and southern states was high. The North and the South disagreed about slavery, with the South wanting to uphold it and the North wanting to abolish it. But when Abraham Lincoln, who opposed expanding slavery, was elected president, the southern states broke away from the United States to form their own country called the Confederacy, leading again to a civil war. Now, as we all know, Abraham Lincoln and the northern states, also called the Union, came out victorious. And after 4 long years, the presidents that had only known war finally had some peace, at least for a couple of days before he was assassinated in a theater by John Wilkes Booth, a Southern sympathizer that strongly opposed Lincoln's policies and the Union's victory. Johnny Boy believed that by killing Lincoln, he could revive the Southern Confederacy and avenge the South's defeat. The once again United States were tired of war, and luckily, following Abraham Lincoln's death, another war did not erupt. What did happen was a time of great unrest. Abraham Lincoln's assassination changed how the reconstruction of the United States unfolded. His successor, Andrew Johnson, had different ideas. Johnson wanted the southern states back in the Union quickly, even if it meant giving them more control. This clashed with Congress, especially the radical Republicans who wanted stronger protections for the freed slaves. Johnson vetoed many laws Congress passed to help African Americans. In other words, he actively worked against granting basic human rights to freed slaves. This all happened because of the death of one man, Abraham Lincoln. But even now, it can always be worse. Take the assassination of Franz Ferdinand for example. His death was my favorite history story in middle school, purely because of the absurdity of it. Franz Ferdinand was the Archduke of Austria and the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. At that time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had control over Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many Serbians saw the Austro-Hungarian Empire as an oppressor, and they wanted to unite all Slavic people under Serbian rule. And when Archduke Ferdinand visited Sarajevo on Vidov Dan, a significant day for Serbians, it was seen as a provocation. A secret Serbian organization called the Black Hand thought of a plot to kill the Archduke. The Archduke and his wife traveled through Sarajevo in an open-top car, accompanied by a motorcade of other vehicles. Their route through the city was published in advance, and the Black Hand's plan was to throw a hand grenade to the Archduke and his wife. But the assassin messed up, and the grenade missed. The Archduke's car sped away, and the Black Hand failed, or at least so they thought. After the first attempt, the Archduke insisted on visiting the injured in the hospital. However, nobody told the driver, and the route was not changed. And when the driver took a wrong turn, the car had to stop to turn around. And while the car was stopped, Gavrilo Princip stepped out of the crowd and fired 2 shots. One hit the Archduke in the neck, and the other hit Sophie in the abdomen. Both died within minutes. And boy oh boy, what happened next scarred the world forever. Over 20 million people died because of World War I, and even more were wounded and scarred for life. All of this was set in motion because of the death of one man. Now, unfortunately, this was not the last assassination the world has known. Over the following decades, many more assassinations followed. All of them had an impact on the world. But one of the last examples I want to give is the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. He was killed by a Jewish extremist that was against the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords were a series of agreements between Israel and Palestine, hoping to achieve a peace treaty.
I hope that they will have the ability, all of us, the Israelis and the Palestinians, have the ability to overcome this tragedy.
But that all ended with the death of Yitzhak Rabin. The death of the Prime Minister made the situation in Israel more tense, and one of his successors, Benjamin Netanyahu, stalled the peace agreements and made the situation even worse.
On the question of security and terrorism, we will not accept the notion that peace and terrorism can coexist under one roof.
And 4 years after the death of Rabin, the second Palestinian uprising happened.
Began such an intense resistance. The protests evolved from boys throwing rocks and people marching to fighters attacking Israeli soldiers and military targets. Palestinians went on strike and boycotted Israeli products.
And again, thousands of people died. Now, the Palestine-Israel conflict is very complex, with deep historical, political and social roots. The assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was just one of the many factors that led up to the Second Intifada, or uprising. But it was still significant. This video isn't about the broader conflict itself, but focuses on the impact of assassinating a political figure. It seems that in today's world, we're becoming more and more hostile to each other. Political divisions are growing, and tensions are on the rise on a global scale. The death of a political figure, especially through assassination, is almost always a catalyst for greater instability and violence. If the attempt on Donald Trump would have been successful, I would speculate that a civil war wouldn't be that far-fetched. Assassinations remove leaders who may be crucial for peace and stability, creating power vacuums and uncertainty. History shows us that the death of a single leader can derail peace agreements, ignite conflicts, and set back human rights progress by decades. The fallout from such violent acts can create a cycle of retaliation and revenge, causing more and more violence. communities become divided, mistrust deepens, and extremist ideologies gain more traction, and rebuilding trust and stability becomes an almost impossible task. The assassination of a political figure has enormous consequences for society at large. It destroys lives, fuels hatred, and almost always leads to long periods of unrest and suffering for the ordinary people. So I think I can say, thank God the kid missed Donald Trump. Don't assassinate someone. However, what you should do is hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.